Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are going to hear from our conference minister, the Reverend Dr. David K. Popham. He's going to enlighten us and fill us in on what's happening with the conference. And so we're glad that you're taking time out of your busy schedules to get updated and spend an hour or so with us. All right, and with that, I'd like to turn it over to David.
I want to start with admitting that while it has only been a half year since we last gathered for the last Aha Pae, in some ways it feels like that was a lifetime ago. And that's not only for me, I know it's for our church leaders and our pastors as well. The blanket of COVID interrupted our rhythm last spring of how we would normally do church. We finally got into a rhythm of a new normal, only for the end of the pandemic to interrupt that and create yet another time of setting rhythms. And that is not an easy thing to do in the span of a year. But you all have done that. And I do give a shout out to our pastors. You acted out of faith and faithfulness to the God who calls us to care for our brothers and sisters who are vulnerable and at risk to this nasty virus. Kudos for the intricate dance of faith you are involved in, even when we don't see the next step in that dance. And sometimes we wonder if the floor is still leveled or if it's been all kinked up on us. So I appreciate each and every pastor. I know you have spent time sweating, time in prayer, time probably wondering, God, should I retire now from ministry? And you've done it so well that you make it look easy. But we know that there have been other times involved. So thank you, pastors, for your faithfulness to your call, your faithfulness to the churches that you serve, and your faithfulness to the people who make Hawaii home. I know you are fatigued. I also know there is just a little more dancing, right, that we're still involved in to be fully clear of COVID. I pray God's continued grace and presence in all that you are doing at this juncture in the pandemic and in the life of Hawaii. Looking at the conference as a whole, there is certainly work that has been accomplished. And you can read about that in my written report. You can find that up on the website. And I will point you there. I'm not going to particularly cover too much of that material here because it will relate things that have transpired between the 198th and the 199th Aha Pae. I understand it is a great cure for insomnia as it does come in at 6 pages long. So if you're ever up in the middle of the night, this will knock you back out. That I guarantee. I do want to, though, raise up the concluding paragraph of that written report, which in part reads, the best that can be said is not here is what was done, but whether here is where we are at. The place where we are at while being the summation of our journey so far is also the staging area for our moving forward, launching out as God's people of faith, sent forth by the Spirit to walk humbly in Christ's footsteps, pursuing peace, justice, and the renewal of all creation. And of course, that last piece is the mission statement of our conference, sent forth by the Spirit to walk humbly in Christ's footsteps, pursuing peace, justice, and the renewal of all creation. So let's unpack that a little bit. We continue to walk humbly, and I'm going to stop there. We might debate if we are walking in Christ's footsteps, but we have been humbled. Both the pandemic has humbled us as it broke us out of our boxes and routines. But more importantly, there's awakening that as we as a conference went through in regard to our financial well-being, and that awakening was a moment of humility. It is an act of meekness to admit that the bottomless bucket of funds we thought would always be available had indeed dried up on us, and to realize that we, like so many other religious entities, must rely on God's goodness and the generosity of our members to acknowledge that we are not financially savvy as we had thought. That takes some humbleness, and you eat some humble pie when you realize some of those pieces. Yet, you have in particular, reacted with anticipation as the conference leadership explored the contours of a capital campaign, which is designed to allow us to honor promises made before our financial realities were better understood. Let me quickly note that the campaign is not only for promises made by the conference, but also promises made by the foundation, so that the two hands of the Hawaii Conference are coming together in support of our churches and pastors. As proposed, and proposed is far from being set, let me point that out, but as proposed, here's how the capital campaign presently breaks down. And I'm giving you rounded figures, so it won't add up to my final total, just to make you aware of that if you're counting the figures. Right now, we are proposing $4 million of the campaign for retired clergy, so that you may retire on the island of your choosing, and that our kukua program may reach beyond Honolulu. We are proposing $11 million in the campaign for the maintenance and upkeep of the lands which the foundation holds as deeds in trust or outright owns because they were given to the foundation. Historical lands as well as legacy pieces for us. We're proposing $700,000 be earmarked for the promise of supporting the position of the Papamakua and support staff. $100,000 set aside for clergy continuing education programs here in Hawaii. $500,000 to invest in new ministry development. Another $500,000 to replenish that empty bucket that we need to give back so that you all have a place to turn to for monies when your own budgets are stretched. And then there's about $1 million that is set aside for a mission project. And that mission project would be medical debt relief here in Hawaii. Not only that we would purchase, but we would take that money and work with other entities in the field and multiply what could be done for medical debt relief in Hawaii. All of this adds up to just about $20 million, a little shy of that, but by the time we add in some other expenses, we're at $20 million at that point. We will be conducting a feasibility study later this summer and early fall. Some of these figures may change, and some of these issues identified as priorities may change as well. That's why I'm saying these are proposed but not set. Your participation in the feasibility study will refine the detailed goals of the campaign. My point here is that we can dream of doing this because you have indicated a willingness to be God's generous people sent forth by the Spirit to walk humbly in Christ's footsteps. Following Christ's footsteps, we pursue peace. Our congregations, and I do want to lift this up as a celebration, our congregations are by and far peaceful communities of faith. And by that, I mean our local churches are places where people wearied by the world can find the love which brings in its wake the peace that passes all understanding. we as a larger family of faith called the Conference, we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet in our pursuit of peace. As I noted in the September 2020 edition of The Friend, a conference does not invest energy and finances in producing a 10-year strategic plan centered on unity without feeling the abrasions of its clashing edges. The good news in all of this is that God's compassion and love through Jesus our Christ continues to be our cementing bond that attaches us to one another. Because of the grace of God among us, our areas of uproar are being transformed into our strongest points of beauty and belonging. Following Christ's footsteps, we pursue justice. There is much pain among our family. The resolution sent from AHEC to the General Synod is born out of that pain. Some of the reactions to that resolution is born out of other pain. Our Micronesian members continue to bear the brunt of xenophobia. And of course, the pandemic released a sting of hate toward those of Asian descent. The work of just healing is ongoing. And until we can look upon each other without jealousy or anger or contempt, we cannot rest nor shy away from the uncomfortable and difficult conversations waiting for us. Following Christ's footsteps, we pursue the renewal of all creation. Now, I know there is an ecological bent to this phrase. However, coming through a year of pandemic, it might be that the only thing we have energy is to renew our own fatigued souls. Still, our spirits are a part of creation as well. And maybe if we can renew creation, it is because we have sought to renew our own souls. We cannot honor and redeem that in the world which we do not honor and redeem within ourselves. There is a tie between us and God's good work. We must rediscover this tie, for until we can see the earth in us and us in the earth, we will fail in our efforts to renew creation. Following in Christ's footsteps is never easy. This is why we must persevere together. We are challenged to adapt and to meet the exacting standards set by Jesus of love, of compassion, of inclusivity that never fails, or when it does, repents and does better. However, we at least have Christ's footsteps to mark the trail for us. The letter to the Hebrews describes Jesus as the pioneer of our faith. This means that Jesus goes ahead of us, marking the way we should follow. How easy it should be to stay on a trail blazed in front of us. But alas, those who crafted the mission statement, and I know some of you are on here. I'm not going to point out, but I'm looking at one right now. So those of you who crafted that mission statement, you added a prefix, right? And that is sent by the Spirit. Now for me, that's the hardest part of the entire mission statement. I can follow Jesus. I can make clear his footsteps, and I even say I've straggled off of his footsteps. But the Spirit, right? What does the Spirit do? The Spirit drives us into the unknown where soul formation takes place, and we search for any sign of God from time to time. So thank you, you mission creative people. God will get you for this, that I know. Through conversations about clergy roles in congregation and some of the workshops at the church leaders event, the Spirit has driven us into the 21st century. Later this summer and into the fall, we will host a series of workshops under the banner Church in the 21st Century. In July and August are the workshops Trust, Thanksgiving, and Transformation, Stewardship for the 21st Century. Also, at the end of July and through August, September, and October, and all the way even finishing up in January, will be a learning experience for pastors and church leaders, Adaptive Church Leadership in the 21st Century, which is geared to help congregation assess gaps between their aspirations and their current reality. Finally, and this date is yet to be determined, we will have a chance to engage in a workshop by the Clergy Leadership Institute entitled Cultures of Excellence, Church Life in the 21st Century. A year ago, this new horizon of generosity, adaptive leadership, and church cultures wasn't even on my radar. Yet here we are, where the Spirit has driven us. This, of course, is not all the Spirit is doing in our midst, as it's each of you can witness to the new horizons the Spirit has sent you to, whether here in the Hawaii Islands or elsewhere, and the lives that are better because the Spirit continues to drive and to send us. I need you to come with me over a short bridge. I need to switch metaphors from following Jesus' footsteps and being driven by the Spirit. I want to talk about fingerprints. There are many ways to speak about the purpose of a church, the purpose of a conference, the purpose of an association, the purpose of your congregation. And with the danger of oversimplifying, let me suggest that our purpose is to place God's fingerprints on Hawaii and in the other areas we are at work through our ecumenical partners. And I invite you to consider what the unique fingerprint your congregation leaves behind. For the Samoans, that will look different from the Filipinos. From the Micronesians, the Kosrae, the Pohnpei, the Chuk, and the Marshall Islands all leave different fingerprints. So too the Japanese and the Okinawans, as too the Koreans and the Chinese and the Hawaiians. This is also the purpose of our chaplains carried out in the lives of individuals and children and youth. Our diversity allows us to leave fingerprints among the majority of communities in Hawaii. And I say praise be to God for that. Finally, one last thought here I have to share. There is not enough ways to say thank you to the leaders who guide this conference. The conference council and missional team members, the foundation board of trustees and committee members, and the office team here in the office, as well as the association leadership boards and committees and the committee on ministry members. These folks who reflect and contemplate, raise insights, and give legwork to our common mission deserve a deep mahalo for their time and talents. That's it. That's all I've got to share. So if you have questions, I'll gladly take them now because we got to stretch this out till we get close to 6:30. Either I've done a great job of communicating or I hidden everything that I was afraid people would ask about. I'm not sure which.
I have a question about the capital campaign. Is that going to be run in-house, or are we expending money to hire someone, some agency to walk us through that?
Yes, to the latter part of that. We've already engaged with is it CSS or CCS, financial company to do the feasibility report. That's a $60,000 cost there that will be split between the conference and the foundation. And then with the campaign being $20 million or whatever our final figure is, we don't have the bandwidth within the office staff to carry that. So we are expecting that we will hire somebody to lead that and most likely wind up hiring in support staff for that person as well. And that's why right now the campaign doesn't quite add up totally to $20 million, but that's where we get to 20 million when you add those pieces in.
Mahalo.
Wonderful, always as usual, wonderful presentation. The question I had is, I loved your comments on the spirit. And my question for you is, in your faith journey coming here to Hawaii, how has the spirit moved you? And how have you, as a conference minister here, have come to start to realize it's the spirit speaking to me, and I need to convey that message to the people around me? Because I think we're going to need that in terms of leadership, that you can help. Well, for me as a licensed minister, how do you translate that into action and leadership?
I'm going to start with the second half of that question first, because it's the one I can answer the easiest, and then I'll move into the first half of that question. The second half of that question is how do I go about, I'm going to make this very personal, how do I go about detecting what it is the Spirit is leading into or saying to me, whatever words you want to put in there. One of the ways I do that is that there are people who have the gift of details. I'm not that person. I have the gift of the big picture. And so part of what I do is that with that gift, and those other people have the gift too, so you all know what I'm going to be talking about. When you have that gift, you just pay attention to what's being said, and groups that don't typically talk together, you begin to put that picture together of all of these kind of corner conversations going on. And that picture becomes a part of what I hear the Spirit saying to me. And sometimes the dynamics are abrasive because they're opposing points of view. Sometimes they're congenial, they just don't know each other's working on the same thing. So that's one of the ways that I've learned over the years to pay attention to. And then I was taught very well in my MDiv experience the gift of also discerning, which means just because I see a picture doesn't mean other people see that picture. So the council has been an extremely great partner to be in conversation with. They at times convince me that I'm not right, which is fine. And then at times they say, well, you're not right, but we're going to run with that anyway, which scares the heebie-bejeebies out of me, but things of that nature. So that's part of it, and that's probably the biggest part. Prayer is a part of that too. And so is the joy of this job. I'm not the only one who does this. All ministers get to do this. But I do have one of the greatest jobs in the world, and that is I get to work with the saints of God. And that's wonderful. And there's so much wisdom and so much insight in the saints that when you listen and you hear, you begin to pick those things up. So that's that piece. The other piece is a little more personal. And so you might not like the answer to that one because I'm still discerning that piece. I've always been one, when I answered the call to go into ministry, it really was, wherever you lead me, I will follow, because I was a naive young person and didn't realize I needed to bargain a little better with God on that one. But in that sense, that track has taken me. I grew up in Kentucky. I was ordained, or not ordained, excuse me. I was given privilege to call through the Eastern Association of the Southern California, Nevada Conference. I served a church in Utah, then made my way over to Denver, Colorado, where I entered conference work. Followed that over to New Jersey, where I was part of the Central Atlantic Conference. And as people have heard me tell this story, when I put my profile in here, I really didn't think I'd be looked at because my thought was, what would people, I put my profile as the winter of the year, right? So I thought, what would people in sunny Hawaii care about a guy sitting in frozen New Jersey? And so that's the piece there. And just trusting that piece, that there's discernment, my discernment, the discernment of a search committee on the other side, and ultimately the discernment of the voting body on the other side as well. I can honestly say that there have been times in this past year where I have gone in prayer and say, I'm not sure I'm the right person for this job, because there have been some very critical times, both in terms of critical discussions going on, substantive discussions, as well as the whole pandemic piece, and whether or not we were doing things correctly, things of that nature. And I'm still here, so it tells me I've not felt the Spirit say it's time to leave, and I know what that feels like because I felt that before as well. So that's part of wrapping it up. Thank you, Nalene, for that question, and reminding us that we're not here under our own volition. We're here to serve a greater cause, connected with the Spirit and Christ and God. So thank you.
One of several questions in chat. The first one is, what were you glad to learn in this last year?
That's a good question. I was glad to learn several things, some of them a little more personal than others. I was glad to learn that Eric Anderson said yes to being the moderator of the conference council because Eric comes with some wisdom, some insight that I have learned to treasure. So I was very happy with that. I was glad that the vaccination rollout in Hawaii picked up quicker than originally thought, and that Hawaii has come through this fairly unscathed compared to other states, right? I'm not saying we haven't had our hardship. I'm glad that that none of our congregations were the point of COVID spread, and that our kahus and our pastors really had to make some tough decisions in order to manage that risk. And I'm so happy for that. I am glad, ultimately, and this is personally in my life, I am glad that I stumbled across the book of Leviticus. There you go, Dorothy, I got it in. That I stumbled across the book of Leviticus, which for some reason has really caught my imagination and just has been a fun thing to delve into for me. So those are some of the things that I'm glad for. Thank you.
David, we have some interest in the person who's in the background behind you. Could you please introduce her, and how is she doing living in Honolulu?
Well, you all know my wife, Carrie. Our younger offspring is over offspring, won't join us. So we don't live in Honolulu. We live in Kailua. You want to come and join us too? All right, she's coming to join us too. Jenna, if you remember, was starting college 2 years ago, and due to the pandemic withdrew, and so she's been living at home now since February. Right? And Ann has a job at Popham, for those of you who know that retirement community. So Carrie, the question is to you.
The question was, how am I doing in Hawaii? Was that the question? Yeah, great, thank you. It was a little difficult. We'd only been here about 5 months when COVID hit. And so we were in our little bungalow for about a year, just the two and then three of us. but I'm out working now, and restrictions are lifting, and I'm really enjoying Hawaii, and really hope to get to meet all of you in person at some point, maybe next AHA. So thank you so much for the question.
Carrie also got a job, which makes it exciting. She works for the state. So if you got issues with the state, call Carrie. She'll guide you.
Thanks.
She was supposed to be sitting behind me making faces during my presentation. So I hope she kept you all entertained. If there's other questions or something you want to ask that I've not addressed, please feel free to do so. If not, then lessons.
Oh, I have
Oh, okay.
something. We're gonna wrap up in a little bit. Kristen is gonna put in the chat the link to the installation service that's gonna start at 6:30. So you have a few minutes to go potty break. But you know, it's the installation of our conference minister. We waited a year for this. And if we were in person, he would be totally decked out in lei. He would be totally decked out in lei.
She said it.
Wait, but now we can't see him getting.
No.
Stay on camera, David.
Come in camera.
This is not a part of keeping it simple.
Hey, 6 feet, social distancing. What's happening here?
Andy.
Oh no, the short one.
Let's just let Leviticus play.
Lori, I counted 4 people that gave him leis. So that was 8 feet.
Ouch, ouch, ouch.
Okay.
So that's that, David, that's on behalf of the conference. So all our sisters and brothers from across the state wish you all the best. Congratulations on your installation. This means you cannot leave. And because, you know, we're such big spenders, we're going to have cheese and crackers after this, after your installation to celebrate. So I think everybody can have like 3, maybe. All right, so we hope that you'll click on the link and join us for the installation service. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.